Have you ever wondered what the difference is between spiritual direction, therapy, and coaching, and which one might be the best fit for you right now? This podcast is for you. Hi, I'm Lisa, and I help Catholic women move from restless potential to surrendered, courageous action in life and business. And I am so excited. I am on a very interesting Lenten journey, I'll call it. It's been a very, I don't know, I think it's been a pretty okay Lent in the sense that um, there has been a lot of spiritual time, like time of quiet. There has been a lot of time processing challenging emotions and challenging situations. And there has been a time of fasting, particularly from my cell phone. So, big shout out to the women who are participating in my Break Your Cell Phone Addiction Challenge. One of the women shared this beautiful message. She was like, I saved 24 hours, like a full day, she realized was spent on her phone. And she was like, as a result of this challenge, a full 24 hours has been reclaimed in my week. And so I find it so interesting. I like treating Lent as a little bit of a reflection time. You know, New Year's obviously can be for a lot of people a time of setting goals and intentions. And I just love that Lent is like right on the heels of New Year's, and you can, take maybe, like for me at least, that's what I did. There were some goals that I had not really put into practice, created any traction around. And Lent becomes a time of revisiting these things. At least it is for me. I'd be so curious to know, how is your Lent going? I'm also on another interesting journey. So, in addition to being a bit less, on my phone and taking a little bit more time for quiet contemplation, I'm in the middle of redesigning my website. And if I may, this process is like not for the faint of heart. Because when you are so close to a brand, so if you are new here, I coach women in life and in business, but I would say the majority of my coaching is in Catholic women building businesses. And I can do this for someone else with like a great deal of objectivity. Like it's like I can be very direct with myself. But it's just like, things that are so, when you're close to your, as you would be when you're close to your work, it can just be a little harder. So I'm very, very grateful. I am working with a beautiful web designer and brand strategist. Her name is Lisa Johnson. We will very likely do some type of dissection. We'll all have her on the podcast to talk about this entire process. But it's been a very interesting, like in kind of in the desert type thing, like not in the sense that I'm feeling the absence of the Lord, but what I mean is I think it's very important in life and in business that we take time to retreat and force yourself, quote unquote, invite yourself would be the gentler language, but invite yourself to take that time away from the doing of the business and even the strategizing of the business to really take a look from all different angles. How do other people perceive your brand? How have you grown? I had the wonderful opportunity to present on Claire Dwyer's praise writers community. Thanks again, Claire, for having me on, Claire and Mike. And we talked a little bit about how my brand has matured, how my brand has evolved, how now I talk about surrender a lot. And that is not something I talked about before. How the various interesting things in my life, my 10 homes in 10 months while being pregnant with baby number 10, how these things have obviously changed how I behave, how I look at the world, how I pray, and then what that does for my audience. And my hope is, and we talked about this, Claire and I, in this interview, my hope is that you are also growing along with me. I remember when I first got into business, I was designing a lot of baby nurseries. So my previous career was interior design. And as I was having children, I was also then attracting a lot of first-time moms, or moms who wanted their nurseries designed. I was designing so many kids spaces, and it was so much fun. And it's just another example that as you go through life changes, you become more, solution minded in terms of that particular challenge. You maybe are talking about it more, so then people are referring you in that particular problem. And I just think it's a natural thing that as our life emerges, as our life evolves, that we start to share and invite as necessary, like as we feel called to our audience, our customers, to come along for that ride. So I'm really excited. I'm tired. Today at time of this episode, I'm a little tired. But I am feeling very, very grateful to be on this journey. All right. Before we get into today's conversation, spiritual direction versus coaching versus therapy, all from a Catholic perspective, I want to remind you how wonderful it can be when we can be together in community. And we are so close to an event that I am so excited about. The Dynamic Women of Faith Conference is happening on March 21st. I have a table that is full. So there was, the opportunity to sit at my table if you got your tickets in, by a certain date while spots were still available. My table is now full, but we can still meet at this incredible conference. Come and sit at the table beside me. Maybe if we get enough people, we can fill another adjacent table. But I would love to see you at this beautiful conference. I cannot wait to see Jeanette Benkovic in real life. This is a woman that I have listened to for many, many, many years. And I cannot wait to say hello to her, give her a hug in real life. There are incredible vendors at this event. Honestly, I think that's one of the things that I really look forward to. There's just like a very wide array of businesses and groups doing incredible things to support the church. And of course, we get together and just be able to relax as sisters in Christ. There will be mass, there will be lunch, there will be opportunity to get into beautiful, beautiful conversation with people. This is like a reunion. Like I see this event as an annual reunion of women in the Greater Toronto area. I know that people are traveling from Ottawa. I know one person from the West. People at my table are coming from all over the place. I'm coming from Peterborough, and I want to invite you to come as well. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see I'm sharing my screen. If you're listening to this, you want to go to dynamicwomenfaith.com, and then you want to click on the red registration button, and then it will take you to the Eventbrite website where you can go and get your ticket. It is a worthwhile use of your money. We deserve, as mamas, as we're going to talk about in this episode, we deserve the opportunity to pause. And we need the opportunity to pause. And you might not think you need the opportunity to pause, but let me just tell you, we all need the opportunity to pause. And I know it costs money, and I know it's a day away from your family, but imagine what it's like to come back to them refreshed. And what is that worth? And so just big time encouragement, give yourself the permission to invest in a day of friendship, of fellowship, of renewal, of nourishment. It's going to be so fun. And I honestly, I'm counting down the days. I literally cannot wait. It is going to be so much fun. Okay. Spiritual direction versus coaching versus therapy, a Catholic perspective. I get asked this question all the time. And just quick caveat before we get into this, quick but important caveat, I am not a licensed mental health practitioner, but what I am is a coach, a certified coach through Metanoia Catholic. So I have received many hours of training in how to help somebody examine their thoughts and move forward in action. And we'll talk about, again, the distinctions in a moment. So just very important caveat. What I have had is about 20 years of experience in all of these different modalities that can help a woman to thrive. So I've had a spiritual director from basically less than 20 years when I started with my spiritual director when my third child was born. So um, that is about 14 years. I have been in some type of therapy on and off for my entire married life. So that's since 2007. And then, of course, I have paid for coaching as well as I am currently a coach coaching Catholic women. So my experience in all of these things is very deep, and I bring this to you as a way to, as an expert in coaching, but also as a sister on the journey, someone who has done all of these things. I hope this episode provides some clarity on how these three different disciplines can help you as well, and also provides you some things to think about what you might need in this season. All right, so let's get right into it. The first thing we need to discuss when it comes to seeing the differences in spiritual direction, coaching, and therapy is something called central nervous system regulation. I recently spoke at the Legatus Toronto chapter meeting, and somebody came up to me right at the end and was like, I think I know what central nervous system regulation means, but can you please explain it because I'm not entirely sure. And so central nervous system regulation essentially is referring to the ability for our body and our brain to be calm. So to return to a calm, balanced state after stress, stimulation, or some type of emotional intense experience. It's essentially like, and I think we all know what this feeling is like, fight or flight. So this feeling of like tension, I'm ready to protect, I'm ready to attack, I'm defensive, I'm ready to fight, or I am ready to flee. And so, like I mentioned, it includes the brain, it includes the body. We know we are dysregulated when our heart might be beating quicker, our breathing might be shallower, our stomach might be hurting, we might be in a season of dysregulation if we're snappier, irritable. You could be dysregulated if you aren't responding to anything. So you actually cannot respond. And regulating all of the things that I'm talking about right now is central to a question: am I safe? If you think about any typical way that you respond in a less than peaceful manner, so just like for a moment as you're listening to this, when was the last time you got defensive? Let's just use that. And just think about what happened when you got defensive. Did you go into fight mode? Did you go into flee mode where you just sort of checked out completely? Did you freeze and you were unable to respond? The mind and the body, because the body remembers as well, the mind may have been asking itself, am I safe right now? So whatever triggered that defensive feeling, whether it was a criticism, a comment, a small situation, the brain subconsciously is asking, am I safe? Okay. So these are survival responses. We have learned this from a very, very young, even in utero. There has been, argument that our ability to regulate even in utero begins. And so all of this is important because it impacts one's need for things like spiritual direction, therapy, and coaching. And so, just wanted to very, very quickly define that before we get into defining these various ways that you can get some help. So, let's begin with spiritual direction. Spiritual direction is essentially working with a priest or with a trained spiritual director. So, a lay person can be a spiritual director. I have seen a Catholic priest for, like I mentioned, when my third child was born. And they are focused on where is God leading you. That is their primary objective. Where is God leading you? So they might ask you questions like, literally, where did you see God in that situation? They might ask you questions about your holy practices. So, like, what is your prayer life like? When's the last time you went to confession? They might ask you things like, what do you think God is interpreting in this situation? And a spiritual director can also, you can ask them, what do you think I should be doing? My spiritual director, I've had two of them because my first one ended up going to Rome. And so then we couldn't continue. And that is how I found Father Damien, my current spiritual director. And I've heard, I can't remember exactly which one of them said it. I think it was my first one, but they were like, basically, I'm on the hook. Like, the spiritual director is on the hook. If your spiritual director gives you advice, that is what my priest told me, is that, like, it's his quote unquote fault if he led you in an area. It is a role of great responsibility, and it is a role, again, around your spiritual practices, just asking this question: where is God leading me? Can a spiritual director, give you life advice, give you relationship advice? Absolutely. But their primary role truly is to help you in discernment, right? What do, like, helping you ascertain, like, what is the Lord's voice, what is your voice. And so any, like, advice or practical suggestions are going to be in that context of discerning how the Lord is speaking to you and where he's leading you in this exact moment. A spiritual director should be, like, can be helping you with your prayer life. A spiritual director can, of course, be helping you navigate crises of faith, spiritual aridity, confusion about, like, God and where he is in your life. Other things that I think a spiritual director can be very helpful around is navigating crisis, in the sense of, like, where is the Lord in this crisis, and helping you to understand his nature and helping you to understand what might come up in prayer or what patterns. That's a really interesting thing that I had not really realized until, my spiritual director presented it to me, because I've been with him for, so many years, is that sometimes the Lord operates in patterns. When you think about it, the Old Testament, there were things that happened that prefigured, is that the word? I believe it's prefigured the New Testament, right? So it, like, predicted, it told the, there were moments that were foreshadowing things to come. So there are patterns in your own life. For me personally, those patterns are around, like, refinement. Like, the Lord has been pretty significant with me in terms of patterns around, like, my need for control, my need for rejecting self-reliance. And a spiritual director can be very, very helpful with that. Spiritual directors can be paid. I would say my experience in the Diocese of Toronto, which is where my spiritual director is they are not paid, but I know that there are some experiences where a spiritual director can be paid. A spiritual director is trained, so you do go through certification through a Catholic institution like a seminary, or at like a specialized program to become a spiritual director. So not everybody can call themselves a spiritual director, and I would say that everyone needs a spiritual director. And I think that everyone needs a spiritual director because it's just a very interesting and intimate thing to discuss what the Lord like to parse through, to navigate this very like private part of your life when you think about it, right? What goes on between you and the Lord in quiet contemplative prayer is very unique and very intimate, can sometimes be confusing, and I do think requires training. I remember hearing Mary Healy on an interview with, forgive me, I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Lila Rose, but she was talking about how hearing the voice of God and knowing it is his voice and not yours takes practice. And like anything, like imagine if I was doing, if I was playing the violin again. I played the violin for 16 years. If I was playing the violin again and I was doing a motion like vibrato over and over again, but was doing it wrong, right? Like doing the same movement but doing it wrong, I might develop tendonitis. I might be exerting like unnecessary, pain on myself. This might not be a perfect analogy, but my point is that you can certainly learn on your own, but I would say more often it is helpful to learn from a trained expert. And so a spiritual director can be really invaluable. I also really love Father Damien is incredibly he holds me accountable. I was going to say he's really bossy, but he's not bossy. He really holds me accountable to some of the things that I say I'm going to do. Like I am going to, pray every day. I am going to go to a weekly holy hour. And I am going to spend time in scripture. Like he is very he reminds me when I said I was going to do something regarding my spiritual life. And he also really reminds me of the patterns that he observes in me. So like, of course you're responding this way, Lisa, because this is always how you respond to not feeling in control. So, spiritual directors, beautiful to have. How do you find a spiritual director? I would just start with your parish priest. Ask him if he does spiritual direction or if he knows somebody taking directees. And then I want to encourage you to check out, speaking of Claire Dwyer, she works for the Avila Institute and they run spiritualdirection.com. And that can be a really, really helpful resource. But don't give up when it comes to finding a spiritual director. Like, just keep at it, okay? Because it is such a worthwhile, and I'm going to say essential. I do believe that it is an essential tool to have in your toolbox. All right, that is spiritual direction. Let's now pivot to therapy. So, where spiritual direction asks the question of where is God in my life, therapy, like where is God leading me? Where is God in my life? Where is God in this situation? Therapy might ask the question, what needs healing in me? What needs healing in me? So let's actually use an example. Um, and I'm going to use an example from my own life. So let's use the example of mess. Okay. I'm going to use the example of mess. I come into my living or my laundry room and it is a disaster. So stuff is everywhere. Okay. And I'm going to keep this like a simple example. I could give a more honest example, but I'm going to keep it just a little, just for the respect of all parties involved to not reveal, you know, uh, really intimate things. We're going to keep it a little bit surface, but just for the purposes of this exercise. So you walk into your laundry room, it is a disaster. You might bring to your spiritual director like something like, um, why would the Lord want me to be so overwhelmed? Okay. So something like that. Or you might bring to your spiritual director, like, this is like, I'm so overwhelmed with mess all the time. Lord, give me more patience. And your spiritual director might say, great, your laundry is a way that you're going to grow in virtue. And the next time you walk into your laundry room, I want you to literally say, come, Holy Spirit, give me the resolve I need. And thank you, Lord, for the mess in my laundry room. Okay, so this is a rudimentary example, but like, just go with me. That might be the spiritual direction approach. Same situation, you come into the laundry room and it is a total disaster, and you have a response. You might talk about the exact same situation with a therapist and say, I get so angry when I go into my laundry room and it is a disaster. And your therapist is going to potentially look to the past and help you to understand why this mess is triggering you. A therapist's job is literally to help you find healing by understanding all the things in your life that have contributed to you reacting the way you do, like in this example, with anger or frustration over mess. And a therapist might ask you questions like, let's think about a time when you felt a similar, emotion. What was happening? They might take you through, like my therapist, Virginia, shout out to you, love you so much, is trained in a modality called internal family systems. And she will take me to, okay, you're feeling frustrated. Can we feel that emotion? We're going to drop into your system. And she will lead me through an exercise where I might bring up memories or I might bring up images that have that same, that where that feeling of frustration or anger, where that might have been present. And sometimes you're kind of like, what is going on? Like, what are these weird memories or images? But a trained IFS therapist in this particular example will help you to, in the case of IFS, talk to your past self, will help you process emotions that a younger version of yourself perhaps was hanging on to. And again, therapy looks at what in the past is contributing to my reactions in life that inhibit me from feeling peace. And again, what's really interesting about therapy is that it can bring so much awareness where you suddenly have a very different perspective and empathy and compassion, I would say, on yourself. So it's examining, like, oh, okay, this makes sense. I am getting so mad at the laundry room because I learned that behavior. It was a pattern that I learned. Like it was always reinforced that, a clean laundry room was essential. I'm making this up, but you know what I mean? Like a therapist will help to see childhood wounds or other traumas that again are contributing to the way you show up in your life today. And here's what's so important about it. When you are carrying deep emotional pain, or when you are really not understanding why you have such a angry response, or frustrated response, or why you freeze whenever a very specific trigger happens over and over and over again, you can do the work to get the healing that will be necessary so that you can have those more peaceful, more productive responses. It's very, very interesting, the relationship between how perhaps you saw your own father and how people see God. And there have been, interesting studies done on when that relationship with, a biological father or a father figure on earth, when that relationship has severe wounds, the relationship with God the Father, our heavenly Father, can be impacted. And so caring for our emotional health, dealing with these wounds can be enormously helpful in not projecting unhealthy things on our spouses, like asking them to meet that need, especially not asking our children to meet that need. That's a whole other that's a whole other podcast episode that I probably would bring a guest on to talk about a little bit, because gosh, like it's not our children's job to fix us, and that's like again a whole other thing. But a therapist is going to look at the past and help you find psychological healing, particularly in wounds. How might you know you need therapy? You might know you need therapy if you have a problem that will not go away. And when I say problem, I'm not talking about like, you know, you can't like figure out how to ride your bike, properly, or you can't figure out how to like keep your room clean. Although those, to be honest, could have deep, those could have deep psychological wounds. But I'm talking like you can't stop yelling at your kids. I'm talking like you, no matter what you do, can't stop entering into certain sinful behavior. I'm talking about avoidance. If you're like a chronic procrastinator and no matter what you do, it is incredibly difficult for you to do tasks when you say you're going to do them, that kind of a thing. When there is just a very persistent problem. Um, and I would say another reason that a therapist can be so helpful is when you really find it difficult to cope. So when I moved back to Canada and we lived in our 10 homes in 10 months while I was pregnant with baby number 10 just a few years ago, I found it very, very difficult to cope. The stress was so high all the time. I felt such abandonment, I guess, from God, and very just, yeah, like just challenged to make sense of a very stressful situation. And my therapist really helped me to understand all the underlying, causes and like why I was reacting to these very specific situations, not being in control is my big trigger, where that all came from, and just provided tremendous healing. When you go back to that question, like, am I safe, right? The central nervous system, feeling safe. It is just a fact that we have all gone through situations in our life that have informed our ability to process stress in our present day. And so therapists can just be so helpful at finding that true healing where you might not ever be completely like, it might not be completely gone. Um, for me, when I have a lack of control, I think it will always stress me out. But the difference today, like many years of therapy later versus Lisa before therapy, is I would cope in unhealthy ways. I would either lash out at everybody, need everybody to fall in line. Whereas today, I am, I have a greater ability to titrate the feeling. Titrate is a great word. I have the ability to titrate the negative emotions that come with feeling like I'm not in control. Okay, so I think that's another way you could say it. Therapists can help you titrate negative emotions that come as a result of um, of therapy. I mean, of trauma and other things. And then finally, coaching. And this is, of course, where I have training, where I have spent, 10,000 hours, where I love so, so much to, spend time, invest time in my own coaching, but also in my improvement as a coach. And coaches help you look forward. So, where a spiritual director might ask you, where is God in this? Where is God leading me? A therapist might be asking, what healing do I need? What do I need to examine from the past? A coach is going to ask you, how can I move forward? Coaches are very much focused on the present day. They are focused on what are you feeling right here, right now. And coaching can help you create a plan. I love coaching. I find so much fulfillment in helping people move forward. I have like so much immense fulfillment from taking people from confusion to clarity, from feeling stuck to seeing progress. I open this podcast with restless potential. Like, I love it when I can walk with someone and help them see that potential actualized through courageous action. And a coach can help you take an idea and move that to implementation. A coach can be very helpful for discernment, right? So when you're asking questions like, I feel like God might be asking me to something, but I don't know where to start. A spiritual director might help you, with Ignatian discernment, for example. They might help you go through processes and questions either themselves or invite you to take it to the Lord, like in adoration alone, and for how to discern. A coach can help you begin taking those first steps. Sometimes discernment is not just the prayer and the quiet. Sometimes discernment is just taking that next little step and then asking the Lord, okay, what do you think? And then reflecting on yourself. Is this feeling good? Is this feeling fulfilling? Right? So it's just so great. Coaching is so, so great. Coaching can also help people with emotional processing, where a therapist might be like, okay, you feel angry. I'm going to help you process that anger. But ultimately, a therapist is going to be like, what is the source of that anger? Like, why do you tend to respond to this similar situation all the time? Because of past traumas, because of past childhood wounds, because of past experiences. A coach might help you to process that emotion. So, what do I mean by emotional processing? Like, literally feel your emotion and feel safe feeling that emotion. So, I was trained in my coach training, and therapists are also, I've heard my therapist say this often. If I'm just expressing anger around something, a coach, a therapist, a spiritual director, everybody can do this. I hear you feeling angry. Tell me more about that. And this is really important. If you were not taught that it was safe to feel negative emotions, does it not make sense that you would run from them, that you would get defensive when being criticized? Does it not make sense that you might zone out completely because you do not feel safe? And so all three of these disciplines, a spiritual director, a therapist, and a coach, but I have formal training in how to help someone process an emotion, feel it, articulate it, give it words, give it breathing room to live for a minute, and then move to a little bit more objectivity. It's one of my favorite things to do. I love helping people move from like, I'm paralyzed by this feeling. All right, I've processed it. I've really taken those thoughts, held them captive, interrogated those thoughts, become more clear about a situation. And if my thoughts are actually, credible, like, are they actually real? Could the opposite of them be true? And then move to a place either of, like curiosity, or move to a place of, I need to do more work in this area. Like perhaps I really need to take this to a therapist, or I really need to take this to a spiritual director, and then potentially to a place of movement and action. I do want to pause here for a moment and talk about how important it is to feel negative emotions. And all three of these entities, spiritual direction, coaching, therapy, can help with this. It can be scary if you, as a child, were taught that it was not safe to feel anger, or if it was not safe to feel sadness or any other negative emotion. In your adulthood, it will feel scary. And so to just be able to feel that negative emotion and be okay. I'm a very positive person. And so I think I have a tendency to be like, oh, cheer up. It's not that bad, At least, you didn't, those kinds of words, like at least we didn't lose all the, whatever, like almost, yeah, just positive. I'm a very positive person. But what I've learned in therapy, particularly, and in my training as a coach, is that it actually serves us better to feel the disappointment or to feel that negative emotion before you go into like problem solving or maybe seeing the bright side. Because again, that ability to safely feel emotions, whatever they are, is how we heal. It can be such an intimate place to meet the Lord. It's where we can receive His mercy, His compassion. And yes, at some point we do have to kind of like move on, so for example, my laundry room being a mess, at some point we have to clean it, or we have to get people to help clean it, or we have to, teach people, how do we keep the laundry room clean, whatever. Like at some point, yes, we do have to move to that. But it's so important to actually just be like, I am frustrated right now. This is frustration. And if you're watching this in video form, I just put my hand on my heart. This can be a way to help yourself feel that negative emotion, but feel safe while feeling it. So a coach can help bridge the gap immensely. I love this expression. Coaches can help bridge the gap between discernment and action. A coach might help you. I just did this for a client of mine, like literally make the list, identify, okay, the gap, we are here today. The gap is here. What are the 10 things we need to do between now and then? And help you create that plan and hold you accountable. So again, just to, how do you know you might need a coach? You might need a coach if you are really stuck on the plan. You might need a coach if you have done therapy and spiritual direction and are still feeling like I need some implementable, action-focused activities in my life to bring this to completion, to move this thing along that I feel like the Lord is calling me into. So just to close, I could talk about this for like hours, to be honest, but encouragement and in closing, I think someone could use all three at the exact same time. So when I moved back from after leaving Florida and moved back to Canada, and we were in a time of such instability, I had all three, and it was so incredible to me. And and then you can, decide, like, as you're moving through these emotions, as you're having these breakthroughs, perhaps you might lessen the amount of time you meet with one of them. You might not meet with all of them in the exact same season, but I definitely think it is worth trying on each of these three disciplines and just see what fruits the human mentorship provides. I could talk about this forever. You know what I mean? Like, I think just allowing someone to help you on your journey, see your mess, hold you tenderly. I've been thinking a lot about compassion. That word has just been kind of rattling around in my brain a lot. Like, what does it look like to show compassion to ourselves, to others? And that compassion also, like, extends to when we behave poorly, when we behave in a way that is from, like, deep past triggers, deep past emotional wounds, to be able to say to ourselves, like, yeah, you messed up there, but it's okay. You're learning. You're lovely. You know, you're a great wife. You're a great mom. This is not just happy, clappy, positive self talk. Offering true compassion to yourself and meeting the Lord in your pain is an element of living fully alive. Okay, this was fun. I want to hear from you. What have you tried? Do you have a spiritual director right now? Have you been in therapy? Have you ever done coaching? Which one of these are you most interested in pursuing potentially a little bit further? And of course, if you would like to try coaching, send me a message on Instagram. As my website is being revisited, redesigned, Instagram is the best way to get in touch with me. Send me a DM on Instagram at Lisa Canning, and I would be happy to talk to you about what coaching with me looks like. And do you enjoy content like this? Was this a helpful, pedagogy, or helpful, exegesis, so to speak, of these three modalities? And what did I not cover? Like, what am I missing here? I will just briefly say I did not talk about counseling. Counseling is different than therapy. Sometimes they get used interchangeably, but their level of training, and I would say the focus, is a little bit different. And I would actually group counseling and coaching in a little bit more of the same sphere, because counselors tend to focus on the present. And that is a very important component as well. So, just very brief side note on all the counselors out there. Just don't want to make you feel left out. You do very, very important work in helping people heal. My friends, it's an honor and a joy to do this work with you, this work of healing and hope and being fully alive, surrendering it all to the Lord. Why? Okay, really, in closing, I know I said I was closing, but really, in closing, why this all matters is back to this phrase I used at the top of the podcast: moving from restless potential to surrendered courageous action. Sometimes past trauma, past experience keeps us stuck. Sometimes that need for our nervous system to feel safe keeps us from moving into the action that the Lord uniquely has for you, the thing that He has uniquely called you to build. Sometimes our past experiences stop us. And do you know who would love for us to not reach our full potential? The enemy. And I think I shared, it was either on Substack or it was here. I can't remember. It might have been both. But I'm reading this John Eldredge book, and he brought up this thought that the devil is terrified of us reaching our full potential. And something about that phrase has lit a motivating fire in me. Oh my word. And so, if you're done with restless potential and ready to build boldly, rooted in Christ, let's get to work. I'll see you next time on the Possibility Mom Live.